Gentlemen, tonight is episode 16 of Karl's Spirit Month. I want to thank everybody who replied this morning early. God, that was early. I know it was 8 o'clock. It was still early for me. With their ideas and suggestions, let me know what you're drinking, what you want to see, what's going on. We'll talk a little bit more about a virtual happy hour here in a few minutes. But tonight, though, we're going to taste something that I never thought I would review. And that's early times. Now, this is not the bottom shelf early times that we've all seen on the shelf. Instead, this is the highly regarded early times bottled in bond expression. And this is actually a really good bourbon. And before we do that, though, tonight, I want to thank our sponsor, Barrel 131. Guys, Barrel 131 is still doing curbside service, so give them a call, tell them what you'd like, and you can go pick up a bottle of whatever you prefer at our friends at Barrel 131. I do want to remind everybody these opinions are mine. It has no reflection whatsoever on Barrel 131. This is just my take, my palate. Everybody's palate's different. We've talked about that before. I always like to do the little history piece. And I think this one's actually kind of cool because, like a lot of bourbons in Kentucky, this starts with a Bean, not Jim. This is his uncle, Uncle Jack Bean, and his first cousin, Ed. They started producing a bourbon called Early Times back around 1860. And they were one of the first to really harness the power of railroads to ship their product. Really improved their sales, it improved their profits, and they did very well using that railroad to get their product to the consumer. Unfortunately, Jack and Ed, father and son, both died within just a few months in 1915, and the Early Times label was sold off to someone outside the family. And finally, Prohibition happened, and it closed for good. The problem was they still had warehouses full of unused product. Along comes Brown-Forman, the producers of spirits like Old Forester. And they purchased the brand, they purchased the unused stock. They had a license during Prohibition to sell medicinal spirits. And that's what they used the surplus stock of Early Times for. Now, nothing was produced at Early Times. Nothing was marketed as Early Times. It was all just sold as medicinal spirit. By the end of Prohibition, Brown-Forman began to produce Early Times. And they used the same mash bill that had been used previously by Early Times, which is a very different mash bill than what Old Forester uses. It has a higher corn, lower rye ratio, makes it a little smoother. By the 1950s, Early Times was actually selling better than Old Forester. And in fact, it was actually one of the best-selling bourbons of the time. However, by the 60s, Early Times fell on hard times. No pun intended there. And it's kind of been relegated to the dusty bottom shelf. No one has really paid attention to Early Times. It's still there. It's just not a very highly regarded bourbon. It's usually about 2 years old. It tastes a lot like kerosene. So a couple of years ago, to celebrate the 75th anniversary of the original Early Times bottled in bond expression, Brown-Forman introduced this blue label 4-year-old bottled in bond 100 proof Early Times. And it is actually produced at the Early Times Distillery in Louisville, which is owned by Brown-Forman. Has a mash bill of 79% corn, so very high corn ratio, 11% rye, and 10% barley. And it follows the bottled in bond requirements. It's bottled at 100 proof. It is aged at least 4 years. In fact, it's a 4-year-old bourbon. And it's the product of one distillery and one distiller in one distilling season. I know it's kind of dark tonight. I'm trying to beat the storm coming. In the glass, this is gorgeous. It's got a great copper color. The sugar line is really thick and very sticky. I assume most of you know what I'm talking about when I talk about the lines on the glass. Swirl it around. Look how far up it comes. You're going to see how far up the liquid has come. and the fluid tries to drip down the glass. This sticks. In fact, a lot of these haven't even came down the side of the glass yet since I swirled it. It is very thick, very viscous. It looks great. It has a very light nose. And I think at first, when I smelled this earlier, it's like there's no nose to this. It has no real flavor. But then you begin to get some of those classic bourbon notes. The longer it sits in the glass, it kind of opens up and airs out. You can really begin to pick up those notes of oak. It's heavy oak, caramels, a little bit of vanillas, but there's also a little bit of spice right on the backside of that. So it hits you all with those real sweet flavors and then a real fine spice at the end. Wow, though. On the taste, this is amazing. So it starts off with spice. So where the nose kind of finished with spice, the taste starts with the spice. It hits me right on the front of the tongue, but it mellows really, really quick. It doesn't burn. It gives me a nice warm, not a deep chest feel, but right in here in the esophagus. It's nice and warm, but it becomes really soft and real creamy. And you really begin to pick up almost a brown sugar taste underlaid with that caramel and that vanilla. The finish doesn't last very long. It's a medium length warm finish. It starts with spice. It doesn't burn, but it really lets you know it's very comforting. It's just warm. And it quickly develops those classic bourbon notes that I really enjoy. I really like the flavors in this glass. It hits everything on my palate. And aside from the taste, I think the other big selling point of this particular bourbon is its price. Ladies, gentlemen, this is a $25 bottle. That's right. It's a bottled in bond, 100 proof with a great taste for 25 bucks. I'm trying to go through a lot of the different bottled in bonds in my head, trying to find a bottle that I would like as much as this. And the only thing that comes close is an old granddad. But honestly, I would buy this every single day at this price point. It's just a really good bourbon for the price. And the Karl rating on this, as a result, is kind of tricky for me. It's not a premium taste. It's a good, standard, basic taste. It hits all the basic flavors I enjoy, but it doesn't just wow you with other underlying flavor. The finish doesn't last a very long time, but it's really smooth and warm. And I guess kind of the best way to describe this is a bourbon that hits way above its weight in terms of expectation and in terms of price. I kind of always liken this to, in my mind here the past hour or so, I've thought about the kid in class who screws off for a couple of weeks and being a jackleg. And then all of a sudden they ask a series of really great questions and they go and ace the assessment. And that's kind of what this bourbon is. It's like, you're like, what? Can't be that good. But it actually really is. It's a really good bourbon for a really good price. So, Karl scale, 4.25 stars on tonight's bourbon. Tasty and inexpensive bourbon. So there are my thoughts for tonight. That's my thoughts for the evening. As always, stay safe, peace, and happy pours.